You are summoned in the dead of night to the royal palace of Madrid. The year is 1833, and King Ferdinand VII lies at death's door. The corridors are dim, lit only by trembling candles. The air reeks of melted beeswax and the faint tang of iron from the guards' polished halberds. As you approach the king's private chambers, an officer presses a sealed letter into your hand, its wax still warm. You are ordered to deliver it to the Queen Regent without delay, and then burn the original. No copies, no witnesses, no record. Inside, the king's voice is barely a rasp, yet his words carry the weight of command. Seal the archives, change the guards, taste every dish, trust no one. It is a strange scene for a dying monarch, but Ferdinand's reign was anything but ordinary. This was a king who had turned private fears into a weapon of state until the day those fears consumed him, and his kingdom with him. To understand the final fevered orders of Spain's most distrusting king, we must step back into the turbulent world that shaped him. This is the hidden history of Ferdinand VII, once hailed as El Deseado, the Desired One, and later feared as the monarch who smothered the very hope he embodied. Stay with me, because the path from beloved prince to haunted tyrant is paved with betrayals, shattered alliances, and a paranoia so deep it outlived the man himself. Ferdinand was born in 1784 into a Spain already staggering under the weight of decline. His father, King Charles IV, was a gentle but indecisive ruler who preferred the hunt to the council chamber. Real power rested in the hands of Manuel Godoy, a former guardsman turned royal favorite whose influence over the king and the queen was the scandal of Europe. Beyond the palace walls, the empire's gold was running dry. Revolts simmered in the Americas, while Napoleon's shadow crept ever closer across the continent. Yet within the ornate halls of El Escorial, courtly rituals continued as though Spain's glory were eternal. Velvet drapes drawn against the smell of the streets, gilded thrones, polished for audiences that grew fewer each year. In this world of crumbling grandeur, the young prince was cast as a savior. The people called him El Deseado, the Desired One, believing he would restore the crown's dignity and Spain's lost might. But the seeds of his downfall were already sown in the corridors, in the court, and in his own restless mind. In 1807, the corridors of El Escorial whispered with treason. Ferdinand, then still a prince, secretly plotted with discontented nobles to overthrow Manuel Godoy, the all-powerful favorite of his father, and seize control of the crown's destiny. His co-conspirators painted him as a reformer, a patriot ready to save Spain from corruption. But when the El Escorial conspiracy was exposed, the image of a bold savior crumbled. Confronted with the threat of ruin, Ferdinand's courage dissolved. He confessed everything, every name, every meeting, every detail to his father. Allies who had risked everything for him were cast into prison or exile, their lives destroyed by the man they hoped to make king. Just months later, the greater disaster struck. In 1808, Napoleon Bonaparte summoned the royal family to Bayonne. There, under the pretense of mediation, he forced both Charles IV and Ferdinand to abdicate. The throne of Spain was handed to Napoleon's brother, Joseph. For the Spanish people, it was humiliation. For Ferdinand, it was the beginning of 6 long years in captivity and the slow forging of the distrust that would define his reign. When the Desired One returned, the nation would cheer, not yet knowing what they had welcomed home. In 1814, the impossible happened. Napoleon fell, and Ferdinand returned to Spain. His carriage rolled through streets choked with flowers and cheering crowds. People wept at the sight of their king, chanting El Deseado as church bells rang from every steeple. It was the homecoming of a savior, or so it seemed. Within weeks, the illusion shattered. Ferdinand tore up the liberal constitution of 1812, dissolved the Cortes, and restored absolute monarchy. The promises of freedom and reform, hard won during the years of war, were swept aside with the stroke of his pen. In their place came a network of informants, secret tribunals, and the resurrection of the Inquisition. Newspapers were silenced, pamphlets were burned, political opponents disappeared into prisons where their names would never be spoken again. The people had wanted a king to deliver them from tyranny. Instead, they had welcomed a ruler who feared the sound of whispers more than the clash of muskets, a man who would rather smother the light than risk losing control of the shadows. For Ferdinand, marriage was never a matter of the heart, it was a matter of succession. Over the course of his life, he wed 4 queens: Maria Antonia of Naples and Sicily, Maria Isabel of Portugal, Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony, and finally Maria Cristina of Naples. Each union was shadowed by the same urgent goal: produce a male heir to secure the Bourbon line. But tragedy followed him, from wedding altar to funeral bier. 3 of his wives died young, their deaths wrapped in courtly whispers and suspicion. With each loss, the crown's future grew less certain, and factions began to form, some rallying behind Ferdinand's brother, Don Carlos, others praying for the birth of a child. In 1830, Ferdinand issued the Pragmatic Sanction, allowing his yet unborn daughter to inherit the throne. It was a direct blow to Don Carlos and his supporters, setting the stage for the Carlist wars that would drench Spain in civil blood for decades. A single signature had altered the destiny of the monarchy. But in the court of Ferdinand VII, every decision, personal or political, came at the cost of peace. While Ferdinand's court tangled itself in intrigue, the empire that had once stretched across oceans began to slip away. From 1810 to 1826, one colony after another declared independence: Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, tearing vast wealth from Spain's grasp. The silver fleets stopped coming. The treasury emptied. At home, discontent boiled over. In 1820, an army uprising forced Ferdinand to reinstate the liberal constitution of 1812, what became known as the Liberal Triennium. For 3 years, Spain tasted reform again, but the king plotted in silence. By 1823, French troops of the so-called 100,000 Sons of St. Louis marched into Spain, crushed the liberal experiment, and restored Ferdinand's absolute power. The decade that followed would be remembered as the Década Ominosa, the ominous decade, a reign of purges, political trials, and relentless censorship. Beyond Spain's borders, its influence withered. Within them, the king's paranoia deepened. And as the economy collapsed, Ferdinand's court looked not for solutions, but for new enemies. By the late 1822, Ferdinand's palace was less a home than a fortress of suspicion. Secret passages threaded through the walls, allowing the king to move unseen or to watch without being seen. Guards were rotated constantly, lest any one man serve long enough to be bribed. Meals passed through layers of tasters, and even the royal kitchens whispered with fear. Letters were intercepted and opened, entire careers ended over a careless word spoken at a banquet. Courtiers learned to smile without warmth, to speak without meaning, and to carry themselves like actors in a play whose script could change at any moment. The king's enemies were not always real, but the consequences they faced were. And as rumors spread beyond Spain's borders, mocking his personal life, questioning his strength, Ferdinand treated gossip as treason, hunting it with the same zeal he reserved for armed rebellion. Within those guarded halls, the air grew heavy with the knowledge that the walls themselves had ears. And in such a place, truth was often the first prisoner. Ferdinand VII's reign offers a lesson as old as monarchy itself. When a ruler's private fears dictate public policy, the cost is paid by the entire nation. His obsession with loyalty, his distrust of free speech, and his willingness to silence both critics and allies sprang not only from political calculation, but from deep personal insecurity. The suppression of the constitution, the endless purges, and the suffocating network of informants were tools to guard his throne, but they also mirrored the way he guarded his own image. In Ferdinand's Spain, a whisper could be as dangerous as a sword, and the truth was treated as a threat to the state. Compared with other European monarchies of the era, where constitutional limits and ministerial governance were slowly taking root, Spain under Ferdinand remained locked in an older, darker pattern. His refusal to adapt did not preserve stability. It accelerated decline, leaving the country politically fractured, economically weakened, and unprepared for the conflicts to come. In the end, the monarch's deepest enemy was not the liberals, the Carlists, or the rebels across the ocean. It was the paranoia within his own mind, an enemy no army could defeat, and no crown could defend against. In 1833, Ferdinand's health failed. The man who had once been paraded through cheering streets now lay in a guarded chamber, attended by ministers who whispered of succession and generals who measured their loyalty by the shifting winds. Outside the palace, the kingdom teetered. The pragmatic sanction had named his young daughter Isabella as heir, setting Spain on a collision course with Don Carlos and his supporters. Civil war loomed before the king had even drawn his last breath. When Ferdinand died that September, the bells of Madrid tolled for their monarch, but they also marked the beginning of the Carlist wars. His widow, Maria Cristina, became regent to a divided realm. His daughter inherited a crown already drenched in suspicion and strife. The sealed letters, the guarded passages, the web of spies, these did not vanish with him. They lived on, shaping a Spain where mistrust was as much a legacy as the monarchy itself. Ferdinand VII entered history as El Deseado, the desired one, yet left it as a cautionary tale. His reign showed how the fears of one man could warp a nation's destiny, turning hope into repression, and leaving behind a kingdom weakened not only by lost wars and empty coffers, but by a legacy of mistrust. In the years that followed, Spain would bleed in the Carlist wars, fight to reclaim its stability, and carry the shadow of his rule deep into the century. But history's vaults hold more than one such shadow. In our next journey into the forgotten corridors of power, we'll open the tale of a secret door inside another royal palace, one that led not to treasure, but to the downfall of a dynasty.